Hey, welcome back, everyone. You are with the Ratcheted and the Resourceful today, and we're continuing our conversation from the first episode of the Ratcheted and the Resourceful. We put out that video this week on both of our YouTube channels, but this time we are having this conversation live and interactive.
Tonight, we're going to be unpacking how to navigate and activate accountability in real time, especially when discomfort shows up. So let's not waste any more time and let's just dive on in.
Well, let's start with introductions. I am Ebony L. Green. I use she, her pronouns, and I am known as the Ratchet Sage in these internet streets. And as the owner and founder of Authentic Distinction, I fix failing systems, not humans, because there's nothing wrong with the humans. That's why I guide change makers. I call them dreamers, visionaries, and revolutionaries. I guide them to fix broken systems so that they can build infrastructure that's rooted in their whole ass truth, the agency of themselves and others, and sustainable growth for everyone involved. That's why they come holler at your girl. So if you're ready to move beyond hustle and start building something that actually works for you, you've met the right strategist for you. So with me, you will get real, you're going to get aligned, and you're going to get to work. So welcome.
And I'm Falangang Muta. I use she, they pronouns. I'm called the Resourceful Liberator. I am a liberation strategist, transformation coach, and diaspora-focused educator. I like to guide multiple marginalized leaders, especially those who are Black, Indigenous, queer, neurospicy, disabled, creative, all the things, move from surviving to thriving in systems that weren't built for us, because they weren't. My work is rooted in disability justice, womanist frameworks, and global anti-capitalist praxis. If you're tired of shrinking, spiraling, and just surviving, you're in the right place. So let's build transformational ecosystems that honor your rage, your rest, and your realness. So welcome to the Ratcheted and Resourceful.
Lynette, you want to introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. This is Lynette coming to you from Aotearoa, New Zealand of Just Us Journeys. I lead or facilitate cultural exchanges between African Americans and other Black and Indigenous people globally. I have known the Ratchet Sage and the Resourceful Liberator in other spaces, and I'm looking forward to this conversation. Especially, my background is in film and television, and I am looking forward to getting some good tips on how to approach accountability, particularly when the people, one, do not have the background that I think the people that we're used to dealing with have. So you can't hold people accountable for things they don't understand, or it's more of a challenge, I should say. And specifically, when it is connected to your paycheck. Those are different waters to navigate. So thank you for letting me be here.
Insightful as always. Well, we did want to hear from you. We were going to ask you to come off mic and tell us your questions and your insights and to talk to us about your own experiences with accountability and navigating discomfort. And Flav was going to tell you that this is a space to reflect and not just to react, right? But I think I love where you're taking this, Lynette, and I think we can just ride with that. How do you approach accountability when people don't have the background to understand it? And that's a question for the Resourceful Liberator. She got the complete framework for that. And so I can't wait to hear what she's going to share with everyone. But I think I'm happy to talk about what to do when it's connected to your paycheck. I actually just talked about that extensively for 2 weeks. But I think that what Philette will have to say today will actually help me take that to another level. So,
Okay. First of all, thank you, Lynette. Welcome in. Love having you here. So we're talking about how to approach accountability when people don't have the background to understand what is at stake, right? And especially when they are not of the same type of background as you were saying. So they don't have the lived experience. They may not have the knowledge, the information. They definitely don't have the wisdom. Let's just be honest, because you can't get wisdom without having those two things. And so That's a really great question of like, how do you navigate that? And I think honestly, from in my world, I would actually say it starts with you having to bring a level of awareness. Period. Point blank, bottom line. I think when it comes to accountability, one of the things that we mistake is that when we're running into situations or people in this type of manner, that we forget that a very basic bottom line thing is literally bringing a sense of awareness to whatever said situation it is that is taking place. Because there are going to be people who offend, there are going to be people who end up crossing boundaries, there are going to be people who are acting from ignorant spaces. Now, understand when I say the word ignorant, I mean ignorant for the sake of like, you don't know. You just don't know better. All of us are ignorant in many things, in multiple things. And so we need to own that. But as the person who either the offense has happened to or the slight, whatever the issue has brought up, it needs to start with awareness because I feel like a lot of times, especially because you were speaking from the context of it being cross cultural. In a cross cultural context, we need to not only have awareness, we also need to be curious ourselves, even though the offense took place to us, whatever it is, we need to be able to be curious as well too in this, and especially cross-cultural affairs, because we need to be able to know like what type of questions to ask, either what questions to ask or what to bring up to make them aware of said offense of like, hey, that's not kosher. That's not kosher with where I'm from. I would also, oh, because you were saying it being attached to your paycheck. So that means it's a workspace. Yeah. Okay. So that's very, I had to pause really quick because I was like, let me think real quick. If it's attached to a workspace as well, too, it sounds as though either you may be in someone else's workspace, culturally speaking, as well. And so they're not going to be privy to the ways that you've grown up. They're not going to be privy to the things that may cause triggers. They may not be privy to the information or lived experiences that you've had, especially if they have not crossed paths with someone who has actually dared to correct the issue. So even in that, like I'm giving a few different things. One, of course, it's all based off of awareness. That's number one. So it's either they have a lack of awareness, and if they're having a lack of awareness, it means that you need to be able to distribute awareness. That would be your responsibility in this. Distributing the awareness, either saying, hey, this isn't acceptable. Hey, can I talk with you? We need to have can we parlay type of thing so that you bring some sense of awareness and not do it in a manner as well too that's just out here. I like using the word ginsuing because it's true. That's just not chopping people apart, but that is still very much so aware as like they're a human being just like you are. So they may have done something even to the fact of like dehumanizing you, and it's very easy to want to backlash, like to clap back and dehumanize them, but that doesn't bring healing. That doesn't bring growth. And the bottom line for all of this is that we want growth. So addressing the issue, but it has to start from a space and place of awareness. And as that awareness comes about for you, you need to know, well, what is my responsibility? What am I responsible for? If they don't know my culture, if they don't know that there's certain things that they're doing that are offensive, then it is your responsibility to make them aware of it so that it does not get repeated again, right? Now, I'm going to put a little asterisk here, okay? Because if this is not the first time that this offense has happened and it has been addressed, please understand the person is now purposely acting from a space of willful ignorance. And that changes what your responsibility is. If this is like first time offense, yeah, move with grace, correct them, have a conversation, keep it humane, say what the issue is and try to come to some consensus, because what you're doing is you're distributing awareness for their ignorance. And it's okay. Because like I said, we've all been ignorant and we all are in different things in different ways. So we don't want to like hold that against a person for being ignorant, but we want to be able to give some information to alleviate that ignorance so that it doesn't happen again. If this, though, is something that has been happening time after time after time again, that's willful ignorance. That's a complete different thing. Your responsibility levels are now different. You have different choices that you can make. Because the thing with awareness, right? The beauty of awareness is that when awareness is distributed and when you have awareness, you can actually know what your choices, your options, or your access points are. That's what happens. So you're depending on how it's approached, because depending on when this offense or how it's happened, you get to choose. So if they're just choosing to be willfully ignorant, you have other choices that you can make. And those other choices are going to be dependent upon how you want to respond. And I would also say, yes, respond how you want to respond. I would even dare to say a clap back is a response. It doesn't actually have to be reactive. And I feel like, especially, I'm going to speak about this from this specific context, especially within Black culture. I think we get misunderstood a lot because when we're clapping back, especially if it's been an offense that has taken place over and over, people have been crossing boundaries over and over. When a clap back comes back, people think that you're attacking them, not understanding. It's like, no, this is not an attack. This is me choosing this to say, you know what? No more. And it's not from a place of, oh, because I can't stand you. It's more of like, this is a choice that I've had. I've always had this choice. I get to approach this in this manner because it is my choice. And it's not a reactive choice. It is still a response. So clapbacks can be responses. They do not need to be looked at as reactionary. You know the difference between a reactionary clapback, which is usually coming from a place of like ignorance as well too, because you can hear it when the clapback happens. And you know a clapback that is full of truth. And because the person has finally been fed up, you don't have to take harm. You don't have to sit there accepting being harmed over and over and over again. You can put a stop to it to say, no, this is a choice I have to make. So that's where I would begin with. Let me pass it over to the Ratchet Sage and see what you would add on to this.
I don't know that I have anything to add on to that. I know that as your client, I have learned a whole lot about distributing awareness and the power of that. There is a benefit to that. I have benefited a lot from distributing awareness. There's many times where I wanted to hold someone accountable and then realized from your framework that I can't make them accountable if they're not even aware that they're to be responsible. I think what really hit for me is when you taught me that people have to consent to responsibility. I think that's the hardest part about it that I've learned as your client is the things that mids and mages, which is who you help, people like us who are multiply marginalized. And we go through things that we should not. And so those experiences, they don't lend to a feeling like this is a human who did not consent to that responsibility. To be a human, like to be good to other humans, right? And I think that's where my work kind of comes in, is from the perspective of how do you give grace and then walk away? So what does that look like? Because yes, they have the right to consent to whatever they want and not consent to whatever they want. But you don't got to deal with it. And sometimes we cut people off earlier than we need to because we didn't spread awareness so that they had an opportunity to consent. Like you can't consent to something you don't know about. And you really truly aren't responsible for something just from ethics perspective, or it's just the right thing to do, or religion says you should do it. You're not really obligated to do any of it for those reasons. And so giving people an opportunity to consent, the biggest part of that is making them aware of your point of view, your perspective on things. And oftentimes that is enough, I found, is to just let people know this is my perspective. But like you said, once you've shared the perspective, you spread the awareness, and they keep. Well, now this isn't an issue of awareness. This is an issue of I am pretending that I consented to responsibility, but I really didn't. And that's to me where it's time for you to separate. It's time for you to get your own space and create what I would call an actionable safe space for you. And that's where I think my steps are useful, in particular when you're in the workplace. Because I get that it's dangerous. It's not safe to hold someone accountable at work. I mean, even if they're below you. Like, we're not even talking about even if they're above you in the hierarchy, we understand that those power dynamics make that unsafe. Power dynamics by itself make people unsafe to hold people accountable at work. But even when the power dynamics are in your favor, they're not always in your favor for many dimensions. I've been 2 levels above someone, but because my skin looked like this and theirs looked like this, holding them accountable was very unsafe. There were times when there was nepotism involved, so it didn't really matter what that person's position was. It was unsafe to hold them accountable or to even suggest something different than what they're pushing for. And so in those situations, I just feel like you have to ground yourself in the situationship that you're in. That's what I would call it. You have to ground yourself, because how can you navigate something if you don't know where you are? You know how you look at a map and it says you are here. That's what I mean by ground. I don't mean woo woo. Let's namaste. I don't know anything about any of that. Y'all got to go see the Resourceful Liberator for that work. I'm talking about full activation. You cannot move from any space until you know where you are. And when you know where you are, you understand what's going on with you in it. Like, what's your relationship with where you're at? So the first step is to clarify the chaos. I'm going to give you access to my CCOFB method, CCOFB. And that first C is to clarify the chaos. It is really important that you identify what specifically needs to be addressed. That's how you identify exactly where you're at. Are we addressing what someone said? Are we addressing what someone did? Are we addressing how you were excluded? Are we addressing how they were excluded? See, all of these are different conversations. And getting real clear in the conversation helps you clarify the chaos. And then write down the behavior or the action that was problematic and exactly what was problematic about it, because that allows you to focus on the action and not the person. I don't know if you had a chance to watch our video, but I made it very clear. I don't believe in shaming people, but we can talk about something you did being problematic or causing harm. I can do that without putting on you that you intentionally did this. Let's just assume it was unintentional. That doesn't stop someone from holding you accountable. So in the case that you find that someone needs to be held accountable at work, getting real specific about what needs to be addressed, literally, and make sure you're writing about the behavior or the action or said that was problematic and exactly why. Because sometimes it was problematic because they had just announced Amanda's promotion, who is a 68-year-old African-American woman who just moved here from the United States. And then your response was this. So in the context of that, that's why it was problematic. So that's why I'm saying it's not enough to just write down the behavior and the action like you keep in a log for the feds. Your job is to really dissect why did this bother me so much? Clarify the chaos. The second C is to conceptualize the real goal. Shift the focus from blame to growth. So what do you actually want to happen? You noted that behavior, the action, what was said, it was problematic. And so sharing that with someone, creating the awareness that the Resourceful Liberator so geniusly tells us to do. But if you do that in such a way that is spreading more blame or induces more shame, then it won't really work. I think guilt is healthy. I think when you're called out on something and you realize, I really didn't want to do that. I didn't want to hurt that person's feelings. I think you should feel guilt. I think you should sit in that. I think that's how you grow. And so when you shift from blame to growth, whether it's I feel guilty about something I did, or I'm not really feeling something that they did, said, or a way that they're moving. If you shift from blame to growth, you're focusing on what is the outcome that I'm aiming for? What was the ideal response? What was several other behaviors that would have been more conducive to what was going on in the situationship? What are several other actions that would have been a little bit better? Some things to say that would have been a little bit more supportive to either inclusivity, humanity, so on and so forth. Getting clear on what you're aiming for. Is it improved communication? Is it a change in behavior? Or is it deeper understanding? What is it? And then you got to outline out where the friction lives. And this is all before you say anything to anybody. You grounding yourself right now. This is all for you. Do you understand what I'm saying? You're trying to get really clear for you before you even approach somebody, because see, that's where your power lies. You start with that clarity. You walk in with confidence. You'll be resilient in that conversation. So you're going to outline where the friction lives. Where is their resistance going to come from? That pushback. Why are they going to be mad because you're saying this? Get real clear about that. That'll help you develop a strategy against it, or a strategy to support yourself. I'll get to that in the F part. But think about, are you approaching this from a place of frustration, or are you really trying to resolve this? Because see, if you're frustrated, you're looking for another job, even if that job is in another country. If you have the intention to resolve this, because you're trying to stay. And if you think about this like a marriage, if you are just frustrated and done, it's time for a divorce. If you fell out of love and you're just having some issues and you want to work through it and you wish you could get back to where it was, you have an intention to resolve. You just don't know how. You probably need some guidance and some support. That's it. Then you want to think about whether or not this other person is likely to feel attacked or defensive, because we can't control how they're going to respond to the situation. But the way that they respond to the situation can impact us, take us out of our actionable safe space. The reason why it's so important to think about how approaching, are you trying to resolve this, or are you coming at this from frustration? Is this person going to be feeling attacked or defensive? Because if their response is going to be, I'm feeling attacked and defensive, there is no way to resolve. You can't change that. And so developing a sense of whether or not they would even be open. And that's where the awareness is so powerful. Putting something out there where I'm not even asking you to do anything. I didn't even ask you to consent to being responsible for anything. I just want you to make you aware that word can be really offensive to Latino people. I've done that. Or, just because that person said that they were bisexual doesn't mean that they want you to call them queer. If they haven't self-identified as queer, we can just call them bisexual. And actually, we can just call them pan because that's their name, and I think just making people aware. But I didn't tell you have to, or you have to leave. So there's no explicit request. The awareness will give you a sense. How do they respond to that? Oh, I don't do that pronoun stuff. Oh, well, then you can't stay here. So I'm giving you an opportunity to be responsible for what you just said. If their response is, well, then I'll leave. Okay, great. So now you can be accountable for holding that position. And you got to go. And I'm going to stand 10 toes down in what I'm responsible for and what I'm holding myself accountable for. It's the person I want to be in this work. And so having a sense of that is super important. And so when I'm outlining out where the friction lives, I'm very much relying on what happened when I did what I learned from Filet to start with that awareness. But then when I'm going to frame the flow, that's the F. And I'm trying to plan how I'm going to communicate clearly and respectfully. And when I say respectfully, I'm probably going to hurt somebody's feelings. I'm so direct and clear because by this time I've clarified the chaos. I've conceptualized the real goal. I've outlined where the friction lives. And I was upset from the beginning, but at this point, I done figured out all the reasons why this should not work if this flow don't go in the optimal way. So I'm planning out how to communicate this clearly and respectfully because this is a human being that I'm dealing with. And I'm thinking about when. That's my biggest question when I'm framing out the flow is when. When am I going to communicate clearly and respectfully? With a client, I can do it whenever I feel like it. I could do it at our next session. I could send a voice note. I could do whatever. At work, well, is it your boss? Are they likely to feel attacked? Are you trying to resolve? Because if not, you should probably tell them that on the exit interview. That's the time to tell them how you feel. That is the time to hold them accountable is when you're leaving. Sometimes if what they've done is illegal and you can sue them for it, you keep logs, you say nothing unless you're talking to your attorney. And that's how you communicate clearly and respectfully. It's through an attorney on your way out the door. So that will tell you what language you'll use to keep the conversation constructive. It's not going to be constructive if you are an employee and you need your paycheck and you're telling them you're going to sue them. That's not a constructive conversation. So you say nothing. You deal with it. You go through all the motions. You don't fight because your fight is coming. They will lose eventually, whether it's through severance, a lawsuit, or they just don't want to deal with it. So they give you money to sign an NDA on the way out. Whatever, frame the flow. And as you're doing it, make sure you are acknowledging their perspective while you're expressing your concerns. I'm not saying to acknowledge their perspective because it's valid. I'm not saying to acknowledge their perspective even because that's required because they're a human. I'm a zero fucks humanist, but fuck their perspective sometimes. It's usually fucked up. What I'm suggesting is that if you do not acknowledge their perspective, you cannot strategize for it. Therefore, you can't win. You got to know what your enemy is doing and whether or not you have an intention to resolve. This person is your enemy until they change. And the resolution is about helping them transform into this new person that you want to work with. If your intention is to let them know that you are frustrated and that's why you're done, you should walk away with something. And in order for that to happen, you got to acknowledge their perspective. So when you're framing out the flow, yes, you want to think about when to communicate. And that's going to be based upon your truth. Do you need this job? Do you need to work in this industry? How does it all work? And it's not the same in every industry. I say what the fuck I want to say. I do what I want to do because the coaching industry is completely unregulated. But I can't say whatever I want to say if I'm a nurse. That's just not real. You lose your license, you can't do this anymore. And then there's certain industries that once you're blacklisted, forget about it. So you have to have a strategy. There always has to be another way that you are going to make your money. Take care of yourself, because we deserve that, especially as multiply marginalized people. So the point is to develop a follow-up strategy. That's what you build. That's the B. Build with systems that work for you. Foundational systems, human-based systems, and tech-based systems. All three. And you want to make sure you develop a foundational strategy for you. Where's the feedback that you need? Where are the audits coming from? From the people who can actually guide you to where you want to go. Where's the inspiration coming from? All of those things. So that you can ensure that whatever you share is going to get you what you want, what you consider to be positive change. Because you may not be able to change the organization, you may not be able to change the industry, you may not be able to change the way that they do things at that hospital or whatever. But what you can definitely do is get positive change for you if you have the right strategy and you're working with the right systems. So create a plan that supports your whole ass self while you are holding them accountable. Sometimes holding them accountable at work looks like, I just can't do anymore if they're putting too much more on you. Sometimes it looks like saying you don't know how to do something when you really do, but you've never shown them that. So you can just pretend ignorance so that they don't put more on you. And these are ways to hold people accountable. It's kind of like pushing back, slight resistance that they can't see, silent resistance until you're able to walk. And sometimes walking means leaving that kind of work, leaving that industry and going into doing something else. So whatever you end up choosing to do, whether you're intending to fix it or whether you're intending to walk away, because this is a work situation, clarify the chaos, conceptualize the real goal, outline where the friction lives, frame the flow, and build with systems that work for you. You do that, you'll be able to ground yourself in what this is and have a plan. So as the stuff's happening each day, like, all right, you're still eating at night. You're still sleeping at night. You're not stressing because you know what you're going to do for you, even if it's a 5-year plan. You survived 5 years already at that job or in that industry. You can do another 5. And in the meantime, make sure you have community around you, like Philip will probably tell you, to support you as you're going through that strategy period. Everything needs time to implement if it's worth doing, but have a good plan so that you're implementing something that's going to get you what you want. And work with systems that are going to make it easy for you. Systems are supposed to work for you, not against you. And so while we're dealing with systems of oppression, which we can't control, let's control the human-made systems that we actually use. Human-based and tech-based systems that we use, which are all human-made. Let's make sure those are working for us. That would be my response.
Brilliant. Thank you. And play. I'm happy to hear more from you as well. But thank you, Ebony. That's, as always, nailed it.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say that was thorough. That was very, very thorough. And so I was going to ask you, Lynette, since, you're the one who's here with us and we're interacting with you, like, what do you feel was helpful for you in this with like what Ebony said? Like, what do you, for the sake of, you don't have to put your situation out there like that. I understand, and not anonymity, we need it on some levels when it comes down to work. But if this, if there are points in here that you can take to work with you for a current situation that you may, if this was a situation that you were going through, I just wanted to see like what has been helpful for you within this.
It's really helpful to have my situation sort of mirrored back in your brilliant words, and to have as part of that mirroring, okay, check, check. Yes, I've been doing the right things in that situation. A big takeaway is the systems and the flow and the win, having, a complete plan specifically for surviving and thriving or leaving the situation. Ebony, I know that's what one of the things that you're so genius at is the systems. So it's helpful for me to think about, what is my system as opposed to I'm going into this meeting. How do I brace myself for what I know is likely to happen? To have a more overall, I do have an overall strategic goal, but to have an overall strategic plan that relates to the specific meetings so that I don't have to kind of like gear myself up for not even battle, but attack in every meeting. Instead, I can be grounded, as you say, in the flow and the plan.
And I know from personal experience, you can't do it without that awareness, responsibility, accountability that Liz brings to the table. It's so interesting. Both of us in our work, and you've seen us develop over the years. It's almost like we both get to the same corner, but we like came from different ends of the block, right? Or from different parts of town, and we ended up in the same park. We always end up in the same place, but we get there in different ways. And I think it's about every strategy needs a plan or it won't get implemented. But before that, you can't implement without an approach. And so every strategy needs great approaches, and those approaches are going to change as the situation changes. Your strategy doesn't change. The plan doesn't always change because the situation has changed. It can. But the first thing to change is your approach. And that's where we mess up our liberation. I'll let Celeste speak on that as we close out. But I know for me, that was the issue. Is like, if I'm not distributing awareness the right way, then there's no responsibility distributed. Then it's all on me. I'm responsible for everything. And if I'm responsible for everything, then I'm going to hold everybody accountable, or you got to get away from me. And there's no opportunity for resolve. So my approach is going to be off. If the approach is off every day, it doesn't matter what the plan is. I'm not implementing it well. I'll implement it eventually, but did I implement it well? You could check a box off, but are you proud that you checked the box off? Or are you just like, hold on to the next thing, And I think that's the dual combo, is that you will, even with the right systems in place, the right strategy and the right plan, and all of the commitment and dedication to implement the plan, if your approach is off with yourself, with others, with the situationship at hand, you won't be able to get to that awareness, responsibility, and accountability that you're really looking for yourself and for other people, so that you can have the win that you're looking for collectively, what she calls collective liberation. But let me turn off my mic.
I did all that and muted myself. Anywho, yes, what I was saying is that approaches to me are everything. And it's because I feel like, one, no two humans are alike, no matter how similar we may be, even if you are twins and you can be identical twins. Still, people need to be approached in the way that actually works for them. And also, I love this portion. And this was the portion that I got from Ebony and her work was, I want to get what I want from it in the end. Like, I should be able to get what I want from this thing, whatever it is, in any situation, right? I didn't have that part of the playbook, but I did have all of the approach stuff because I have seen people fumble, like massively, massively fumble, not being able to get what they want. But it's also because I fumbled. Oh my gosh, like how I fumbled many times because I didn't know the not even correct, but I didn't know ways of approaching these things. And so, yeah, things would either fumble or it would be, I knew how to approach these things, but as I'm approaching these things, because people weren't either aware or didn't want to take responsibility, and there was a lack of accountability, there was nothing that could be done in the end. So I needed to make a decision. And I've had that situation happen more than not, which was I had awareness. I'm distributing awareness. I know what my responsibility is. So I'm stating this is my responsibility. This is my boundary. Just as like, I know I'm okay with being held accountable. It's just how I am. It's what I do. It's how I move. But other people aren't willing to be held accountable. So I found myself multiple times over when situations like this would happen. The best thing that for me that I did when I find that there is an impasse, there is no resolve, the person wants to be obtuse. But again, I also understand that I'm going to say it from this 2 points. There's a certain level of privilege in being able to just be like, yo, I'm done and I'm moving on type of thing because I get it. Finances are real. Bills still need to be paid. Late stage capitalism is still doing what it's doing globally. Okay. So I understand that there's a level of privilege of being able to just get up and go. But the thing for me is that I've refused to be put in situations where once I really understood what was going on, I refused to be put in situations where there was erasure. I refuse for people to erase me. I absolutely refuse for people to erase it. And so, because I held that as a very high standard, as a very high value, I left and I let people deal with my absence more so than it was to deal with me. Because being erased, just because people want to be obtuse, let them. That's perfectly fine. You can. You can be, and you will not have me. You will not have me. You will not have my brilliance. And I also understand that, this ain't it. So I hope that helps for us to really understand you have like your values and your beliefs and all that stuff are going to come into play with how you approach things. This is why liberation, number one, is not a one size fit all. It's not. Liberation is bespoke. Liberation is what all of us desire and what all of us really want to move towards. However, the way we move towards it is going to be different because we're different people. However, we need each other and we need collective liberation because there is no liberation without the collective. Audre Lorde said it, without community, there is no liberation. So you can try and be liberated by yourself. I'm going to just tell you that that's not a thing. Sorry to burst people's bubbles. Sorry, not sorry, actually. So that's really what it is. It's like, but be mindful of who you are. Be honest about how you want to approach this and what this is going to work, how it's going to work for you and what you want out of it. Like, be very, very honest about yourself about that. And I think when we do that, it keeps us into a space of where we're going to be responding more than we will be reacting. So you move actually from a place of response more so than reactivity. Yes, that's what I got. And I hope that that definitely helps. But yeah, we're going to be closing this thing out. So yes, Ebony, what is it? What are the last minute thoughts, bits, the whole nine as we close this out?
I guess I would say that, in the meantime, y'all will be getting the replay, a resource kit that will walk you through all of the things that we kind of talked about today, but not just in a workspace, but also in other spaces and other places in your life. How do you respond when you're held accountable, and how do you hold other people accountable? So we're going to give you a bunch of resources on that, and that will be going out with the replay. You'll get that in your email within about 3 business days. But in the meantime, just to really absorb, I always tell people, process what you're learning. Because if you just learn it, then your head got bigger. You didn't get bigger and your life didn't get bigger. So I want you to get bigger. So just take a moment to think about a time, when you were called out. How did you feel? How did you respond to that? What did you do? And then you can reflect on a moment where you needed to call somebody out. And how would you have responded to that differently now that you know what you've learned from me and the Resourceful Liberator? And write down a takeaway or insight that you got from today. Sometimes just writing it down actually helps you. And I just want to say major gratitude. Thank you for joining us. Be sure to check out Falaise Medium Piece on erasure. It was delicious. Broke down the system of erasure so you can know what you're dealing with when oppression is hitting you. It is actually a whole system. It's set up to do what it's doing. And if you understand how it works, you can deconstruct it. Okay. And be sure to check out my Systems Rants page for more updates and insights on how to deal with folks out here when you got to hold them accountable, when you got to set it straight, when you are actually ready to pull the trigger. Come learn from what I got to say in my Systems Rants. We are building a culture where discomfort leads to growth, not silence. That's what we're all about over here. And that's what we want to get y'all to understand today.
Yeah. Thank you for that shout out as well, too. Yes, please go learn what the system of erasure is doing because it's kicking all of our asses. And I just want us to be able to kick its ass back so that we can move into a place of where we're no longer surviving, but moving into that thriving and ultimately flourishing. That's my desire for all of us and for collective liberation. So, with all of that, I want you to be able to challenge your biases, reflect on your reactions and keep pushing for change. Because when you're able to do like all 3 of those things, I promise you, growth will take place. It's a natural thing to happen. Change is constant, change is normal. I know it's hard for us to do so as well, but this is definitely important. So let's keep this conversation going. And until next time, y'all, I hope that you've learned something here. Check out the resources when they do drop. Check out this replay. Listen to it whenever. And don't forget to check both of us out on our different platforms as well, too. You can find us by our names. I am the Resourceful Liberator, and Ebony L. Green is the Ratchet Sage. You can find us all across all the different platforms as well, too, so that you can come and engage with us in conversation as well. Like, you want to take this learning, you want to go deeper, our platforms will tell you how to do that with us, okay? So thank you so much, Lynette. We appreciate you being here. We appreciate your vulnerability and opening up to us as well. That's what these types of conversations are about. That's what we want. So we deeply appreciate you. We hope that you enjoy yourself and that this will move you forward on your journey. So if nothing else, till next time, y'all. Peace.